Hello, fellow Movie Crusaders, and welcome to my latest episode. My name's Sean Wasserkrug, and today we're going to be doing a special request review of Terrifier and Terrifier 2. This request was made by a longtime good friend of mine, Erin. She requested that I review these films because she's a horror buff. I personally hate clowns with a fiery passion, thanks to Pennywise the Clown from 1990's It. But she was one of the main supporters of my channel when I first started out, and she just got married this weekend. Congratulations on that. So I figured, here's a nice wedding present. I'm going to torture myself by watching these two movies for you and review them for you so you can see exactly how these Terrifier films are. And a lot of buzz has been going around these films, mainly because the sequel just came out, and it has been getting huge word of buzz. One, for its positive reviews on Rotten Tomato, and two, for people claiming that they are passing out and throwing up in the theaters. But I had never seen the first film, so I figured I have to watch the first film before I watch the second one for connectivity issues and continuity. And like I said, I am not a fan of clowns. I am also, I love horror, but I am very particular about my horror. I'm not a fan of torture porn, which for people who don't know what torture porn is, that's your Saws, your Hostels, your stuff where you're doing gore more for the style of it and less for the substance to help move along the plot. If I'm gonna have some real, gory gore in a film, I want it to elevate the plot and work with it, not just let's see how brutal and demented and disgusting we can get just for the sake of doing it and not to elevate the story. So Terrifier is one of those movies that I thought was going to be a lot like that, and shockingly, it is. But nonetheless, like I said, it's a special request review, so my scores are not going to be as high as other people's because, like I said, not my kind of films. But I will try my best to be as lenient about it as I can and look at this movie as what it is, which is a horror film. Now, Terrifier, or Terrifier 1, basically takes place on Halloween night as Tara Hayes and her friend, blanking on her name here, Tara and Dawn, basically find themselves running into the infamous Art the Clown, who has an obsession for sadistic murdering. And that's basically the main plot of the story. You got these two girls who are coming from a Halloween party. They're basically arguing over who's going to drive and which one's less drunk, and they run into Art the Clown, and thus starts the insanity of this film, where Art basically makes it his obsession to follow these two girls and to give them a night that they will never, ever forget. Now, with most of these films, I'm not looking at this movie for its stellar acting. I'm really not, because a lot of these, and I think Terrifier is now it went from probably maybe a C or D kind of horror film, but has been elevated now to at least B to almost A because of how Terrifier 2 is doing. But Terrifier 1 is really more of a C to D type horror film. It's, I will say this, David Howard Thornton, who plays Art the Clown, he's doing a phenomenal job. I think the guy who's doing this he is going above and beyond of this character. Art the Clown, he's mute, so you never hear him scream or laugh or talk or anything like that. So he has to do a lot of selling through his facial expressions and body movements. And David Howard Thornton does a fantastic job of establishing this incredibly creepy man of Art the Clown. If there's one incredibly big positive I have for both films, it is definitely how he is as Art the Clown. Jenna Cannell, who plays Tara, I actually liked her performance overall. I mean, like I said, for the kind of film that she's in, I thought she did a solid job. Catherine Corcoran plays Dawn. She's your typical horror film character. She's the slutty, dumb, blonde character who basically is inevitably going to basically fall down the wrong way when it comes down to a horror film. But I think she actually does a solid job as Dawn. For the first 30 plus minutes, you're basically following Tara and Dawn. I liked their banter back and forth. The writing is not the best, obviously, but I did believe their friendship. I did enjoy watching these two together. And then you throw Art the Clown's creepiness into it, and it just kind of is all working. But there is certain situations, certain actors that pop in and out, and just certain dialogues that just don't quite work. But once again, we're looking at a C to D kind of horror film. But what what most people are wanting and what most people are looking for when they come to the Terrifier films is the blood and gore. And while I was prepared for exactly how brutal and how gory this film is, I will say Terrifier 1, outside of a couple moments, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I mean, yes, there's some very brutal kills in this movie, but they're not anything outside of the realm that we haven't seen in other films before. It's just that the camera stays on certain moments a lot longer than others. Now, there are two moments in the film where even I was going, damn. One is a particular scene with a hacksaw, and that's all I'm really going to say without spoiling it. That was literally like, wow, they are really going there with that scene, and it's a long scene. And then there's a scene with a we're going to call her the cat lady. And what happens to said cat lady is very much Wild Bill and Silence of the Lambs, and it was one of those things where it started off incredibly creepy, but then became borderline comical and just borderline stupid by the end of it. But I can see for a lot of people who like this sort of thing, that is a very creepy visual and a very unsettling visual in the film. I think for me it worked, but went on too long, especially since, like I said, it's hard for me to say. Granted, this is a movie that's 6 years old, but I'm trying not to spoil it, because with a lot of people who are seeing Terrifier 2 now, they probably have never seen Terrifier, so I'm trying not to spoil the film, even though it's 6 years old. The scene goes a little too long, and it kind of doesn't make sense for the events that happens later. But one of the things that this movie does that I am not a fan of, and horror movies do this from time to time, is when you're following your leads or your final girls or your supposed final girls, and you follow them for most of the film, and about halfway to 2/3 of the way through the film, we basically cut away from them and we pretty much start over with a brand new character, a character that we really haven't really been developing, a character we really haven't really got to know, and then we're supposed to, like, not believe, but kind of follow that character and make that character either another final girl or the new final girl of a final girl that died previously. I'm not a fan of that, because the problem is, like, you've given me 30 to 40 minutes, almost an hour, of me following these girls in the beginning of the film and me investing my time into these characters, to then completely abandoning them and me having to try and get kind of reset and follow this new girl, and this new girl being Victoria, played by Samantha Scafidi, or I probably said that wrong, but you know who I'm talking about. And it's not that she's bad in the film, but the problem is that I've already had all this time built with Tara and Dawn that now I got to start and reset and focus on Victoria, and it just doesn't work, because at that point we're in the meat of the film. We're in the near the end game of this, and now we're kind of having to reset. And I think for Terrifier 1 that hurts it. Also, much like a lot of horror films, and like I said, this is my own personal thing, so I'm not going to knock this film for it, but it does certain things where in a typical horror film where they knock down a killer, or in this case Art the Clown, and instead of trying to finish the job and kill the guy, they just run away and not expecting the guy to catch back up to them and do stuff. It's very frustrating, because I know these characters, one of my biggest pet peeves when it comes to horror films, or even sci-fi-ish horror, like your aliens and stuff like that, is when you have smart characters who have to be dumb to further the plot. You can't have a character who's intelligent and at least bright in terms of what they're doing for 95% of the film, but then when it comes to a point for them to actually do something smart and clever, they basically turn dumb, because if they're smart and clever, the movie ends. But they have to be dumb in order to further the plot, and that really irks me when movies do that, because to me it seems like lazy writing, because they can't figure out how to keep the character smart without stopping the film. And if you're a good writer, and if you understand how a horror movie should be done, you should be able to keep your character smart without sacrificing their intelligence in order to further the plot for the killer. And Terrifier 1 definitely fails at that. even though the film, I think, clocks in only around like an hour and 24 minutes or an hour and a half, it does kind of get a little numbing by the end of it with all the kills, because it just kind of feels like everyone just keeps kind of making the same dumbass mistakes over and over and over again, even though people have phones, and it doesn't seem like anyone wants to ever call for help or call 911 or do anything like that, which, once again, I get that. If it's a horror film, people are supposed to be dumb. Old horror films kind of as a higher regard. I feel like if you're going to be a horror film, you either can do the same old cliche shit, or you can try to be above that, much like Scream was when it came out, and make yourself better. Be different, be better, don't be like everything else. And Terrifier does a lot of things, but does fall into a lot of the same horror tropes. The gore is there. The gore is good for the people who want that brutality of gore. But there are certain elements of the film, especially with Art the Clown, where, like I said, personal preference, he's one way this whole film, but then just when he's about to mainly be outsmarted, outwitted, or even outbattled, the Art the Clown basically does a cheap shit kind of thing to basically get the upper hand, and that shit really bothered me. It really bothered me when Art the Clown used a cheap tactic to get the upper hand, because if this character is as powerful as they say he is, or as you know what he is in both films, he shouldn't have to resort to cheap tactics. And I think a lot of people are probably going, what is that? And I'll brief moment, I'll spoil a little part here. If he's mostly using knives, saws, sharp objects, then when he pulls out a gun to use it to get an advantage, it really just kind of deflates me in terms of his character, because it's like, really, dude, now you're going to use a gun? Like, it's a cheap tactic that I just really wasn't a fan of. And it's one of those things, like with my old pro wrestling mind, that if you're a good heel, you shouldn't have to do the cliche heel stuff to get over. Be creative. And Art the Clown randomly just starting to use a gun at one point because he can't beat somebody with his normal tactics just feels like a cheap cop-out. But nonetheless, like I said, nitpick for me. Like I said, Terrifier is not a film that I am necessarily in love with. I didn't regret watching it, but I didn't feel like, oh my god, I can't wait to watch this again, or I can't wait to tell people to watch Terrifier. So for me, I'm going to give Terrifier, the first film, a 50%. There's things in there that are promising, that are liked, but there are certain things to me that just feel cliche, that basically feel like lazy writing. The plot's very bare bones, which can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on a horror film. I think this one needed a little bit more, especially because of the ending of the film. It really just kind of goes off the rails in one certain respect, basically supernatural, where there is no explanation to that at all in the film prior. It just seems to be thrown in there just to throw in there to have a insane ending, which really kind of just pulled the movie out of focus for me. But nonetheless, I'm going to give Terrifier 1 a 50%. Going into Terrifier 2, it takes place literally right where Terrifier 1 ends. And Terrifier 2 definitely has more of a budget. It does have more of an actual plot to the film, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. There's definitely more of a plot to this film. I do think some of the performances are better. The general plot for Terrifier 2 is, after being resurrected by a sinister entity, Art the Clown returns to the timid town of Miles County, where he targets a teenage girl and her younger brother on Halloween night. The first part of that plot summary is bullshit, which is resurrected by a sinister entity, because that is never shown in the film. He just is alive again, basically, in the film. Mini spoiler to the end of Terrifier 1. But it's one of those things where the characters in this new film, the sequel, the final girl, or the main girl you're following in this film, is Sienna, played by Lauren Lavera. I actually really liked her performance. She was a little skittish kind of a character at the beginning of the film, but once we get to the actual night of the main plot of the film, I really think she kind of comes into her own as a character. I actually really enjoyed her performance overall. Kaylee Hyman, who plays her friend Brooke, I thought was solid, even though she looked like Catherine Hahn, a young Catherine Hahn in a lot of these visuals. But I think she was a solid friend. To me, she's not as good as Dawn was in the first film, but she's a solid friend character for Sienna in the film. Then there's gotta find her little brother, Elliot Fulham, who plays Jonathan. He's okay. There's some bad acting in there, but I mean, he's basically playing a little brother role. But there are certain moments where he's given a little too much to do acting wise, and he is just not up to par for it. But he's fine for the role that he's in. You also have their mother, played by Felissa Rose, who basically, I remember watching this and going, all her dialogue is just her screaming at people. There's not really a whole lot to her character outside of just yelling at her children or yelling in general, which is a very grating kind of character for me. I was not a fan of that at all. So by the time we get her to be off the film, it was definitely a welcoming kind of thing to have happen, which is rough to say for a film. Then you also have Sienna's other friend. I think it was Allie. Played by Casey Hartnett. Actually, I think their parent was Barbara, played by Sarah Boyd. Either way, a lot of these girls all kind of look the same in the movie, but yeah, that's what I'm talking about there. But Allie, played by Casey Hartnett, she probably has one of the most brutal scenes in Terrifier 2 with Art the Clown. This is probably the scene that most people are probably talking about in terms of their fainting or throwing up while watching this film. This scene is borderline utterly ridiculous. It's demented. It's over the top with its brutality and gore, and also just kind of borderline ridiculously stupid. It's a very WTF moment with this scene. It's, I think, overdone. I think it pushes the boundaries of what they want to do in a film, and I think they probably should have pulled back a little bit. I know a lot of people are like, well, Sean, you just can't handle it. No, I can handle it. But like I said, there's gore that helps to elevate an actual story, and then there's gore to the point where it almost comes off like a smut film. And this particular scene was a scene that was just way too overdone, way too over the top, went on way too long, and basically kind of just made me just feel bad watching it, and I felt sorry for the character watching it, which I know you can say, like, oh, you feel sorry for all the characters that die in a horror film, but no, this one was just like, this girl did not deserve 99.99999% of the shit that happened to her. But it's just, it was a very tough scene to watch. It didn't, like, make me turn off or anything like that, but it was just one of those things where I was just like, man, what the hell? Like, come on. Like, let's just get through this. Like, can we, like, not that I want to fast forward, obviously, because I'm watching a movie, but it's like, let's just move on from this, because we've hit the point of just utter ridiculously insanity of this particular part. There's also this nonsensical subplot that's going through this whole film that starts at the end of Terrifier 1, that continues on through Terrifier 2, where Art has apparently supernatural powers that are never established, that are never explained, that are never congruent with the actual subplot story. There's a connective tissue with Sienna and her brother with Art the Clown that is never established, that is never explained, that is never congruent. There are certain things that happen in this film that are just so, that while watching the film just made me go, what the fuck is happening right now? And not because of it being crazy, but it's just because it's nonsensical stupidity with this film. It's more or less like they just were deciding, we don't want a straight-up man who's just a crazy killer clown guy. We gotta have all this crazy supernatural element and stuff that happens that we're not gonna have any grounded story to explain it. It's just going to happen, and you just kind of have to just be on board with it. And for some of it, I was on board with, but then there are other parts where the movie just does something so out of right field that you're just like, what the hell is going on? I'm lost. Why is this happening? What is happening right now? Can someone explain it? And they're not going to explain it to you. Now, supposedly, there's a third film that's going to be coming out that's supposed to explain all this. Well, you don't wait till the third fucking film to explain why this character does certain things in 1 and 2 that can't be explained. Nonetheless, it's one of those things that really irked me throughout the whole film, because I want to have at least a line of explanation to how characters are doing certain things that they shouldn't be able to do unless supernatural elements are involved, and if they are, how are they involved? And there's nothing that's explained in Terrifier 2. There's a 5 to 7 minute post-credit, mid-credit scene after the film ends that is just so laughably ridiculous that if anything, it kind of just made me think less of the film for adding it to the movie overall. But nonetheless, also, oh yeah, there's a girl character, like a ghost character, who follows Art the Clown around, kind of like a little mini Art the Clown, but it's a girl that is apparently in Art's head, but other people see her, but then they don't see her at the same time. It, once again, doesn't make any fucking sense, but it's Terrifier 2. You're not supposed to make sense. It's just supposed to be gore, 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 kill, kill, gore, gore. Because the plot's not supposed to make sense, apparently, with these films. Nonetheless, in terms of Terrifier 2 compared to Terrifier 1, I like the performances better in Terrifier 2. There are some real bad performances, but they outweigh the non-performances in Terrifier 1. The gore is better in Terrifier 2, even if it does go way too far overboard compared to Terrifier 1. Art the Clown, David Howard Thornton as Art the Clown, he's still great in this. He like I said, he's a guy who knows what he's doing. He knows the Art character, and I think he actually is the best part in both films, as he should be. Does this make me want to watch Terrifier 3? Only so it can kind of explain all the bullshit insanity that makes no sense in these previous two films. That would be the only reason why I'd want to see Terrifier 3, because, like I said, these aren't my kind of films. But I do think Terrifier 2 is technically better than Terrifier 1. I think Terrifier 2, if you took the nonsensical supernatural bullshit out of this film, I actually think I would actually give this a fairly positive score, because it's doing exactly what it wants to do. But because it has so many moments where you're just raising your hands and going, what the hell is happening right now? Or what the hell, how did that happen? And have no explanations to it, that is what drops its score down lower than what it possibly could be, where it could be a relatively positive score for me. It drops it down below positive for me because the plot is just so nonsensical that it's very hard for me to fully back this or to fully feel like I would have to recommend this for anybody. Plus, like I said, the gore is a whole other thing. But if that's your thing, then both these movies are definitely going to get you what you want to do. So for me, I'm going to get Terrifier 2 a 59%. It had the ability to be something better, but like I said, the nonsensical plot really ruins it. And like I said, one brutal kill scene is so completely over the top, overdone, that it just kind of made me feel bad. That I was like watching it / potentially trying to enjoy this scene overall. But I hope you guys enjoyed this review. So if you guys did, go ahead and hit that like, share, and subscribe button to the channel. Like I said, these aren't my films. These might be fantastic films for people who like these kinds of movies, and they are great. Aaron, who requested these reviews, if you like that kind of film, fantastic. You're probably going to love both of these movies. They were just not my kind of films. Nonetheless, we've got reviews out for Don't Worry Darling, Ticket to Paradise, non-spoiler and spoiler review for Halloween Ends, as well as many more reviews that have dropped in the past week and a half. And then later this week, Brian Michaels and myself will be here to do a season wrap-up of The House of the Dragon, Rings of Power, and She-Hulk. So we got plenty up on the channel for you guys to check out. And until next time, in case I don't see you, good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Movie Crusaders.
You're still here. It's over. Go home.